Y'all, welcome back to Kentucky Fried Wargaming. We're two guys who aren't qualified to talk about anything, decided to talk about a game with hard math and chits. I'm Joe, and John's not here with me today because life happens. But despite that, we still have to get an episode out. So, much like with the Death Guard video, I'm just gonna run solo on this one. And to be honest, if I'm running solo, that means I get to pick the topic. And the thing that's kind of been rattling around in my head the most lately, especially in terms of lore, has been a faction that I adore, and in my opinion, I think might actually have some of the best lore in Age of Sigmar as a whole. If it doesn't take my top slot, it's at least fighting for it. They've really taken this faction and twisted it in interesting ways to kind of turn old perceptions on its head with a whole new layer of incredible, beautiful fluff. And that's the Flesh Eater Courts. They've recently had a whole bunch of minis released, which probably puts them a little higher up on everyone's minds. Personally, I have been playing quite a bit of this faction. I'm playing it in the Store League right now, trying to learn the new book, because they really redesigned a lot from the ground up for the better. And as they are now pushing this faction to the forefront of the game with a lot of new mechanical heft and a huge refresh to the model line, again, one of the most impactful model line updates we've maybe ever had for a faction in Age of Sigmar, I thought it'd be a good time to take a minute while I'm running solo and explain why I think Flesh Eater Courts are so incredibly cool and why a lot of other people seem to as well, just looking around me and seeing how many people are playing them. And to understand the Flesh Eater Courts, much like a lot of the stuff we talk about on the show, you kind of have to understand them through one prevailing trait that they all share. This is often the case when they go to design a faction. They'll take some like action words or descriptors, and they will start to ham them up and crank them to 11, and then design around them, both in terms of narratives and mechanics. And for the Flesh Eater Court, that comes down to one thing, and that's madness. From their ground up, baked into their very core, is madness. Absolute insanity and delusion. These things infect their every waking second, and every Flesh Eater Court member is enshrouded in calming mists of delusion. And that madness not only infects the citizenry, but also their history. Because this is normally where I would go into the backstory of a faction and tell you where they came from and how their creation came to be, and then how they had a schism from their god, or maybe they haven't, and it would all kind of lead nicely to modern Age of Sigmar. We cannot do that with the Flesh Eater Courts. At their core, all of them are insane, which makes them inherently, from the ground up, entirely unreliable narrators. That's the fun of the faction. If y'all have played Vampire the Masquerade, the role-playing game, there are a lot of Malkavian vibes going on here, and I hope that's intentional badly. And this means that if they can't view their reality correctly in modern setting, looking back, it is just as tainted. So they have sort of like two prevailing myths of their creation. And both of them center around their Mortarch, Usharon. If you don't know what a Mortarch is, in short, in Age of Sigmar, there is a god of death, Nagash, the Undying King. And he is a turd. Like, I'm not going to mince words. Nagash is a terrible, petty, petulant celestial entity, and he's a wonderful antagonist. I love him as a character. I hate him, but I love him. And for him, there's a lot that he wants done in his long-scale schemes. So he has trusted lieutenants of sorts that he brings into the fold, he takes under his wing, he gives an incredible amount of power and authority, and then he tasks them with a job and an army and has them go do it. You probably know some of them, like Neferata, or Lady Oleander, or Manfred von Karstein. These are huge characters in the fluff, every single one of them, and each one of them leads a faction of some kind. For example, Lady Oleander is the Mortarch of Grief. She leads the Night Haunt, and they're all her children, essentially. Catacros is a Mortarch of Bone. He leads the Ossiarch Bone Reapers. And here, Usharan is the Summer King, as he calls himself, or the Mad King. He leads the Flesh Eater Courts. His fluff was actually really, really veiled in mystery for most of the setting, until recently when the new Battle Tome came out, and they have done an incredible job fluffing his lore up, to where now there are two sort of creation myths that exist. And which one you get told and sworn is true across the realms depends on which court you're talking to and how they tend to view Nagash. And that anchors their perspective. So, perspective number one is that Usharan was a wonderful, noble king who was a vampire lord, much like Neferata or Manfred, and who rallied his children as who he was incredibly benevolent to and who he loved deeply. And he was a just ruler for all the realms until things started to go awry with his lord Nagash. There are a couple of things alluded to that this could be. It could be that Usharan found out that Nagash was going to do an incredible ritual that would destroy everything, and Nagash rebelled. And Usharan rebelled against his god of death. It also could be that Usharan wanted Nagash's power for himself, so rebelled against Nagash. That one I think is more out of favor. It's more so, it seems to lean that he had some sort of like misguided or maybe noble intentions. And then once he tries to go toe to toe with Nagash, obviously Nagash is incredibly angry and beats him to a pulp, magically speaking, and then imprisons him in a vault of thousands and thousands of mirrors that we know as Shadespire, that you could think of as sort of like a pocket dimension meant to torture Usharan for all eternity. Nagash loves this. He loves to torture people for all of eternity. It's his favorite thing. If you want to see more of that, there's Night Haunt fluff that's real good at it. Or you could read the novel Nagash the Undying King. Again, does this all the time. So it's not unbelievable that Usharan displeased him in some way, whether trying to do good or ill or what have you. And then Nagash locked him away. And locking him away for who knows how long, because once you get into like the Age of Chaos, time gets really wishy-washy. Nagash locking him away caused him to sort of disassociate from reality, and to start to lose his mind inside of this prison. Or, option two, if you are more favorable to Nagash himself, is that a similar start that Usharan, the Undying King, was a hulking, incredibly gifted, strong, and noble leader to his children as he was growing his court, and devoutly loyal to Nagash. And after hearing of some sort of banditry that had been happening, Usharan himself went to go deal with these problems because it was happening towards the edge of the realms. And you could think of the realms sort of like a dinner plate, and towards the center of that plate, right in the core, is where it is the most stable. And you could make societies there and build a life there, and you could expect what's happening there to stay sort of how we understand reality now. There are physics, there's time, all of it works in a predictable manner. And then as you head out towards the edges, things unravel, everything becomes iffy, and you start to unravel as you exist because reality starts to unravel. You are in the pure essences of creation, which makes it an awfully difficult place to go for anything. And Usharan told his soldiers not to come with him because even he was not sure if he would survive this, and he knew they wouldn't. And then he left. And when he came back, he lived, but he wasn't quite right. And their noble lord started to attack the citizenry and to murder them wantedly and for nothing in these horrific moments of rage and anger. And Nagash saw what was happening to one of his lieutenants and decided he would assist him and then put him not in a prison. No. Prison's a harsh word. Better PR spin. Put him in a cask that's for regeneration to heal Usharan and to try to repair his mind over time. Which one of those you choose to believe? Toss up. I personally lean towards the former, but to each their own. It's ambiguous by design. Again, unreliable narrators. But what both agree on is that while he's in this receptacle of unknown purpose, receptacle of dubious purpose, Nagash has angered Sigmar, betrayed Sigmar, and Sigmar came to essentially give Nagash a swirly, and as he stormed through the realm of death to beat the absolute piss out of Nagash, as you would imagine, a god rampaging causes a lot of collateral damage. One of the things he hit without knowing was this shroud cage, or this rejuvenating vault, and it fell, it broke, and out crawled Usharan. Unstable, out of his mind, but alive. And he scuttled off into the shadows of the realm, and as vampires do, started to pass his blood on and to create new courts. Now, viewing himself in a delusion. And this delusion was to sort of like deal with the reality he was facing, where he could see himself how the tales put him, as a regal, noble lord trying to do right by his people, who was not a struggling feral monster. No, he was a put together king, and that delusion is inherited by all of his children. His bloodline inherits it just by nature of being his. His madness is their madness, and that creates their reality. I mean, you can see from the art, the Flesh Eater courts look monstrous. Absolutely monstrous. But for them, again, operating under his insanity, they view themselves as regal lords and ladies and soldiery, fighting for some righteous cause that is sort of individualized from court to court to court. And each of them want to create a just kingdom under their lord as a beacon for others to come and join their citizenry, and to expand. They see themselves in this sort of like high French or high European style, always as a bunch of very regal nobility led by some sort of king, a ghoul king, as everyone else calls him. And everyone involved has good intentions, because again, it's delusion. But all of it is in their minds. And that lack of understanding is what makes their history and their existence so unsettling, and why even their essentially like their Primarch doesn't have a defined story, because there's just not a stable foundation to build one off of by any of these courts in any of the places that they live in. And they live pretty much everywhere that there's a dark rock that they can slither underneath. So if a lot of their history is iffy, what do we know? Like, what are sort of like the hard facts that everyone can lean on? So across the realms, in the darkened hollows of civilization, lurking monsters can be found. Many varieties and sizes, and all led by their liege, a ghoul king or ghoul queen. Some high person leads them, and this is their vampire lord, the one with the most strength, the most ability, the most concentrated blood from Usharan. They feed this blood to their subjects, and they make their own lieutenants, who are their nobles, who serve underneath them. And then, as that blood is passed out to soldiery, the soldiers get bigger and stronger. So they come all the way down at the lowest form, ghouls. And the ghouls look a lot like normal humans, who have just sort of become emaciated and drawn and feral, and who've fallen into the delusion, but haven't gotten sort of the mutations, and like they're not juiced up like some of the bigger troops are. And then you move up into who they call the knights. These are the crypt horrors and the crypt flayers. One is sort of like a 9-foot tall gorilla creature that, again, was a human who was given enough blood of their lord that they started to get bigger, they started to get stronger. And the crypt flayers are similar, except they're sort of like bat humanoid hybrids, who, again, given the blood of their liege lord, start to get bigger, they start to get stronger. And as they get even more strong over time, they can end up as nobles themselves of a number of varieties who are packing magical power on their own, magic and prayers, which makes them pretty terrifying foes, and all in all makes them a pretty terrifying threat for places across the realms to have to handle. And sort of common knowledge in the realms is that at least per outsiders, is that their purpose in life is pretty simple. They want to kill and they want to eat. Sort of like fairy tale monsters pulling people from dark, isolated trailheads, or people sleeping in their beds too far away from the center of town. And that they want to drag these people back to their hovels to share in a feast with their fellow beasts. You know, that they're sort of like opportunistic predators, looking for the isolated and the vulnerable. And this isn't fundamentally wrong, especially for smaller courts who don't have a whole lot of soldiery to like go out there and do wars. This is fair enough. If it's mostly ghouls and then like one liege lord and one or two nobles, that's probably not far off. But it's missing a fundamental piece of the puzzle, and that's the courts not only want to feed, which they do, but they also want to spread. The courts want new subjects at their core. So this can happen in a couple of ways, and we are getting more and more lore on this. So the first way that they will find new subjects is through proximity. Because if you get too close to the flesh eater courts, if you are out trying to take supplies from your village to some farmstead, and you go through an area that is too close to the flesh eater courts, there's a chance they might just eat you. But there's also a chance that in being in proximity to their madness, this magically induced insanity, that you start to fall under their spell. And you start to see what otherwise would be just red flag after red flag after red flag. I mean, like horror movie slasher red flags, like bodies stapled to walls and pits of blood. Stuff that would make you probably turn around and run home. And you start to see them as just normal bits of topography. And maybe they even start to look kind of appealing to you as they smooth over some of your survival instincts. And if you walk to the center of the court where the king is located, you might end up becoming a ghoul permanently from being too close. This can also be done directly by the Flesh Eater courts. There's now fluff where they sense desperation in the realms. People who have been cut off for whatever reason, and in their absolute desperate need in some calamity, have turned to things like cannibalism to try to survive. And when this happens, some of the courts feel it, like a shark smelling blood in the water, and they will go find them. And out of the darkness will come these shambling, oddly shaped creatures to bring you food. And if you take a bite, you're one of them now. Welcome to the kingdom. Welcome to the citizenry. It's pretty rough. Or through the last one is Old-Fashioned Crusade, where if a court starts to get enough people underneath them, they might go out and physically find new citizenry, which was pretty rare before, but now that Usharan is back, they're Mortark. The Flesh Eater courts are on the rise, which has not really been the case for them. They've been like carrion scavengers, surviving in the dark, secluded recesses of societies. Now they're getting a little more emboldened that they've got a central figurehead to lead them and to shape their delusion in ways that are beneficial to his purpose. And man, they are spreading. In part because of a new fluff piece that I think is just incredibly cool. We have found out that there's been this stuff happening in the cities of Sigmar where people are spontaneously becoming cannibalistic. And there are many stories of like Callus and Toll going to investigate. I think it's Callus and Toll. There's some witch hunters going to investigate happenings. For example, a person who had a family and a job and was totally normal was found missing one morning with their family killed and eaten in their homes, violently, terribly, and they were gone. Upon investigation, it first thought, maybe they were attacked by an animal, but obviously can't be an animal. Secondarily, maybe they were a chaos worshiper. Maybe it's a Khorne ritual. No chaos iconography, no dedications to a dark god. Nothing. Except for an odd bottle of empty wine called the Summer King's Brew. And what we find out, and now we know, is a new way they're spreading, a new way to get the proximity spread is through a scheme that's being done by Neferata, the bitches get shit done sub-faction leader for death, because God, she is always just working some sort of angle, and it usually work, and this is another one, where in order to destabilize the cities of Sigmar, and to kind of start to get anchor holds of death in their cities, she would, is trying to, use the blood from Usharan, using her spies and courtiers, while he is sated on food and in a, torporous state, to bleed him, and to fill these jugs with what they label as fine wine. But it is blood straight from the source, and then send it to places and cities where it can be distributed. Maybe it's sold to rich nobles, maybe it's given to some church for church services, but it's going to end up in someone's hands, and it's going to be foul, except for the moment it touches your lips. You're going to be under the sway. And it's going to become the most delicious wine you've ever had. And the more you drink of it, the worse off you become. And maybe you want to then share it with others. And then the worse they become. And before you know it, now, who knows how many people, dozens, hundreds of people in the middle of a city, with no warning, with no provocation, are violently attacking other citizens before fleeing into the darkness to go sort of regroup outside the walls and to create a whole new threat that could last generations, all because Neferata did some positioning. Again, another way that they are exploding in population in the fluff. And this spread of population leads to a spread of madness, which leads to new ghoul kings rising. It's a whole incredible cycle. And that's kind of the fluff where we stand. There's much more we could touch on, like, for example, the courts, the subfactions. But instead of getting into all of that right now, because I think it could be a video on its own, some of these subfactions are really, really cool. I just want to like briefly dovetail the discussion into their mechanics on the tabletop, because this faction has been redesigned from the ground up to have an identity that, in my opinion, is much more closely associated to their lore rather than some of the previous iterations. And I think it's important to talk about here because, let's be honest, like, most of y'all listening to us, or me in this case, are people who are here to have a good time. You're here to get some fun story, and you're also someone who might be intimidated by rules that look big or overwrought or difficult, and that's entirely fair. And I think these rules could be that way for some people, as I've seen from some discussion. But I think actually, once someone walks you through them, they're not all that bad. And first, we got to talk about the big one. Their new core ability functions around what they call noble deed points. And there's a whole lot of text that could be explained here, but the big thing is this. Your army is going to have heroes in it. You're probably going to have quite a few heroes. I would be surprised if you don't walk away with at least 3 heroes. Some of them are going to be what they call, like, courtiers. Some of them are going to be nobles who are like kings and regents, stuff like that. These heroes, all of them, are going to get bonuses when they do cool stuff on the battlefield. If they cast a spell in the name of their kingdom alongside their soldiers, they get points. If they cast a prayer on the field, they get points. If they start dealing damage to enemy units in melee combat on the field, they get points. And all of these points are tracked by hero, which means each hero, as they do cooler stuff, gets more and more points. And then you get to spend these cool points by hero depending on how you want to use them. And it gets a little flexible. So the first thing you could do is, if you have a king, a noble, you could call for aid, and nearby soldiers, another unit of soldiers, it could be knights, it could be ghouls, will come running to the battle to help you in this terrible struggle against what I'm sure is terrible nefarious foes. So if one of your units dies and is fully dead, you can spend some of your points on a king or a regent, and boop boop, that unit comes back at half strength, rounding up, which is real cool. It's a real nice way to sort of get some punch back after you've taken a beating. The second thing you can do is you could revive heroic warriors who have already fallen in the fight. So if you have a unit of 3 crypt horrors, you're like big beefy guys, and 2 of them have been just maliciously attacked without cause by some Stormcast Eternal ne'er-do-wells, and 2 of your guys are laying dead. If you have noble deed points in your courtier, you can raise them from the dead, and they stand right back up in that unit. And they're back in the fight, because vampires are awfully hard to put down. And then the last thing you could do is you could hold on to these noble deed points. And if you choose not to spend them, a hero who clicks over to a certain threshold can trigger Feeding Frenzy. And Feeding Frenzy is essentially your lord who has done enough and drawn enough blood and has enough power surging around them that they could rally the soldiery into a righteous frenzy against these horrid foes. Or some would say that they could make them all want to devour gristle and gore entirely while their victims are potentially still alive, and a savage display of wicked delusion. But those people are wrong. It's definitely the former. Uh, and these now righteous soldiers will attack them, and they get +1 attack in an AoE bubble around them. So if the hero goes out there, he starts kicking some butt, he starts tearing some people apart. The other units around him and an aura also get bonus attacks. It's really good. How it plays on the tabletop, honestly, not all of that difficult to understand once you get a couple of reps in. The hard part comes with trying to understand when and where you want to use your points. And I think for the longevity of this book, that's going to be a lot of where the skill lies for a Flesh Eater Court player, and how you get comfortable on where to spend it in your situations. Further, the second thing that they now do, again, dovetails directly to the fluff, is you get to pick your own delusion at the start of a match. So you don't have to build it into your list. It's at the start of the match, meaning you get to pick it by opponent. And this is much like in the fluff, how a Ghoul King or Usharan himself can sort of puppeteer the delusion of their soldiers to smooth over their minds when there starts to be dissonance, depending on what they need at the time. So if you are going out to a battle and you're going to start a fight, and you know that you're going to be fighting an enemy army that is full of monsters, let's say you're fighting giants, gargants, you can choose to have your delusion be the royal hunt. And your whole army is going to get bonuses to attacking monsters for the rest of the game. Because in the fluff, your leader has puppeteered the delusion to make this look like a royal grand hunt. A noble procession heading out into the forest to slay some terrible beast. And your whole army wants to get in on this action. You're going to get a bonus. Maybe instead you know that you're going to be on the defensive. You're going to be on the back foot. You're going to have to get on these objectives. You're going to have to hold them hard against a pretty durable foe. In that case, maybe your leader starts to twist the delusion into being that these ghouls are the defenders of the realm, and that your whole army, all of them, believe that their direct realm, their homeland, is being invaded, and that they must hold fast and repel this foe. And then, while you're on an objective you control, your units army-wide get an extra bonus to their save. Or maybe you need to absolutely kick it up into high gear, and you want to instead tell your force that they're attending a beautiful, beautiful feast, and that it's time to eat. And the entire Golden Corral buffet is just over there behind the enemy deployment zone. And what do you know? The buffet is running around for some reason. How weird is that? Go check that out. Tell me what that's all about. And you can do Feast Day, which means now, instead of needing 6 Noble Deed points to kick everyone off into a frenzy, you only need 4, because they're kind of primed with chum in the water. And there's more of these, but you get to pick them depending on what you need, and all of it ties into their madness. And that, combined with the Noble Deed points and how they work together, for me, is an incredible expression of their fluff. I find that, I am a person who's oftentimes pretty sensitive to what's called, ludonarrative dissonance. It really just means that, stuff on the tabletop makes no sense, or doesn't make sense for what the lore tells you to expect, or what the models look like. So, for example, if you had a bunch of, huge, really strong-looking minis, and then you looked at them and you found out they had a strength of 2, you would look at it and go, what? That's weird. That doesn't make any sense to me. Here, I find that this is almost the antithesis of ludonarrative dissonance. This force takes the fluff and ties it into the mechanics so incredibly well that I can't help but have fun to play it. And I really have to tip my hat to them. This is design that's really well done, and it is hard to do. And while I certainly have some mixed feelings about some of the other books they've come out with over the past couple of years, I think this one's really, really fun. I cannot recommend it enough if you're someone out there who's interested in them. I mean, This is a faction that's so cool that I started getting minis for them back in the first edition of Age of Sigmar, and I never got rid of them despite me not liking their 2.0 iteration. I just couldn't do it. I wanted to hold on to them because I love the fluff so much. And now they have kicked off this new book, and over a span of about a month, I painted my tail end off to make my own custom court, the Court of the Final Call. And it became my first ever fully painted Warhammer faction ever. Between 40k, Age of Sigmar, this is the first one. Largely because they play on the table how I picture them in my mind. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And I hope y'all are also into it. Unfortunately, John was not here to laugh at some of my jokes, but don't worry, he will be back on the next one. But sometimes life happens. And for y'all out there in listener land, if you want some other videos like this that are much more casual, that are more laid back, or focusing on a particular faction, please reach out to us, let us know. The comments are down below. Social medias are open. We love to get feedback, and anything y'all ask for heads to the top of the list. And for now, it's been all of our opinions, bona fide and Kentucky Fried. We'll see you on the next one.